from section 7.4. So if we look at problem number 1, we're asked to solve. If we kind of go through that checklist that we had of our notes, it's in factor form and it's already set equal to 0. So all we're going to do is set each factor equal to 0 and start solving. So what I need to do is say x is equal to 0 and 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. I already have this is solved completely, so one of my answers is x equals 0. Now, using our earlier skills of Algebra 1, I'm going to subtract 1 and then divide by 2. So my other answer is x is equal to -1/2. Let's try one more that's in this form. In problem number 2, we have x plus 2 times the quantity x minus 6 times the quantity x minus 2 is equal to 0. This is already in factored form because I have all of these parentheses, and it's already set equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set each factor, each parenthesis, equal to 0. So to get started, I'm going to say x plus 2 is equal to 0. X minus 6 is equal to 0. And x minus 2 is equal to 0. And then I'm going to solve these, which means I need to subtract 2 to do its opposite. One of my answers is x is equal to -2. I'm now going to add 6, which means my second answer is x is equal to +6. And my last factor, I'm going to add 2, and I get x is equal to +2. Notice here I'm getting 3 answers, x equals -2, x equals 6, and x equals +2. Now in the next two examples, we're going to look to try to find these x-intercepts. It's where they cross that x-axis. And we know it's the x-intercept because the y-coordinate is going to equal 0. So here we have the equation y is equal to x plus 1 times the quantity x minus 5. That's this graph right here. We're trying to find these x-intercepts. The x-intercept is when the y-coordinate is equal to 0. So I'm going to go to my equation, y is equal to the quantity x plus 1 times the quantity x minus 5, and I'm going to replace that y with 0, and everything else I'm going to drop down. Now it's just like the previous two problems. I'm now going to set each factor equal to 0, because now I have it set equal to 0 and it's in factored form. So I'm going to say x plus 1 is equal to 0 and x minus 5 is equal to 0. I'm going to solve both of these. I need to subtract 1. So x is equal to -1, and here I'm going to add 5. So x is equal to +5. Notice what we just found is our x-intercepts. This ordered pair right here, that's -1, 0. So let's write it as an ordered pair. And this ordered pair over here, well, that's going to be 5, 0. So I'll write that as an ordered pair. What we just found were x-intercepts. Let's change that, make it a little neater. We just found these x-intercepts. The ordered pair was -1, 0 for this point right here, and 5, 0 for this point over here. So let's try one more where we need to find these x-intercepts. So in problem number 4, here we have y is equal to x minus 4 times the quantity x plus 2. And we're asked to find these x-intercepts. Remember, an x-intercept is when the y-coordinate equals 0. So my first step is to replace this with 0, and everything else is going to stay the same. So parentheses x minus 4, close parentheses, x plus 2. I'm now going to set each factor equal to 0. So now I have x minus 4 is equal to 0, and x plus 2 is equal to 0. I need to solve for x, so I need to do its opposite operation. So now I have x is equal to 4. I need to subtract 2 for that opposite operation, giving me x is equal to -2. Notice what we just found are those x-intercepts. which means that this ordered pair right here, that's the ordered pair. X is 4, the y coordinate is 0. This ordered pair right here, the x coordinate is -2, and we've already said that the y coordinate is going to equal 0. So here we have x-intercepts when we're solving for an x-intercept is where it crosses that x-axis, or we also call them zeros, which we're going to look at later. Now, in these last two problems, 5 and 6, we need to do a little bit of work because it's not in factored form. So going back to that previous lesson, we need to find the greatest common factor. It's already said equal to 0, so I just need to focus in on that left-hand side of the 4x plus 10. And what I need to figure out what is the greatest common factor with 4x and that positive 10. Well, between 4x and 10, that GCF is just going to be that number 2. They don't share any x's in common. But I need to figure out what's going to be remaining inside the parentheses. So 2 times what, to figure out that first spot, 2 times what will get me 4x? Well, that's going to be 2x. And then I need to do the same thing to figure out this back term. 2 times what will get me 10? Well, that's going to be 5. I can always check my work because I can do 4x divided by 2 is 2x, and 10 divided by 2 gets me 5. Now, it looks like problems number 1 and 2. Now they're in factored form. So what I need to do is I need to set each factor that has an x equal to 0. So all I'm going to do is set this 2x plus 5 equal to 0. 2x plus 5 is equal to 0. I don't need to set this 2, that GCF of 2, equal to 0 because there's no x to go with it. And we just would have 2 equals 0, and that doesn't make sense in our problem. So now we have 2x plus 5 is equal to 0. And we're going to solve this for x. I'm going to minus 5. 2x is equal to -5. Divide both sides by 2. And I get x is equal to -5 over 2. Here I'm only getting one answer. So my only 0 is at -5 over 2. Let's try one more problem where we need to do a little bit of factoring and then solving, like a combination problem. So in problem number 6, we're given 3x squared plus 6x is equal to 0. So step 1 of it being set equal to 0 is already done, but it's not in factored form. So we need to factor 3x squared plus 6x. So let's start between 3 and 6. The greatest common factor is going to be 3. And then between x squared and x, that greatest common factor is going to be x. What I need to now figure out is what is going to go in that first term spot, and then I need to figure out what's going to go in that back term spot. So let's figure this out. 3x times what will get me to 3x squared? Hopefully we see that it's just x. I can always check it because 3x times x does in fact get me 3x squared. And then let's do the back one. 3x times what will get me 6x? Well, hopefully we see that's going to be a positive 2. Now I'm in factored form. I'm going to set each factor or each piece that has an x equal to 0. So now what we're going to do, we're going to say 3x is equal to 0. And x plus 2 is equal to 0. And I'm going to solve both of these. So in the first one, I need to divide both sides by 3, and I get x is equal to 0. That's one of my answers. And then let's do the next one. I'm going to subtract 2, and I get x is equal to -2. And that's going to be my second answer.